So we finally got Shunsui's Bankai, and a lot of people are a little bit confused as to what they were watching, which is totally understandable because it is a little bit outside the box even for Bankai. So let me break down how it works, and I'll also tell you guys the backstory as to where it comes from. Once it's activated, it affects the entire atmosphere and perception of the environment he's in. As you saw in the anime, the radius was large enough to cover the entire Soul Palace. It follows the concept of theater with 4 acts, and each act has a different occurrence narrated by Shunsui himself. It says that the entire environment was filled with dread and despair, which piggybacks off the concept of his Bankai, which is theater. In total, it's comprised of 4 acts, with each act having a different occurrence narrated by Shunsui himself. The first act, which I won't even try to pronounce because I know I'm going to butcher it, is called Wound Sharing. Any wound inflicted on Shunsui will also be inflicted on his opponent. The kicker about Act 1 is this also works in reverse, so any wound inflicted on his opponent will also be inflicted on Shunsui, but with the caveat that no one can die in Act 1. The first act essentially tells a story of a person who suffers from the same wound as his partner but can't die. Act 2 is the incurable disease, where black marks pop up on the opponent that bleed profusely and cannot be cured. While this is happening, Shunsui narrates the story of a man who regrets the wounds inflicted on a partner. So he's essentially being plagued by the pain he caused to someone he loves. Third act is drowning in the abyss. The entire battlefield is consumed by a body of water that drains you of your spiritual pressure, and it's basically the last man standing. Whoever runs out of spiritual pressure first falls into the abyss. Now the fourth act, titled The Execution, is where Shunsui Zanpakuto's spirit, Ohana, appears. Here's where Shunsui narrates the story of a wild and violent man who's basically incapable of being sensitive to the affections of a woman. Man's ears are cut off before he's beheaded, which is pretty much what happens to Shunsui's opponent. Instead of using his Zanpakuto, we see him using a thin white thread. Now, if you remember from the beginning of the fight, Stern Rider X is able to become intangible when he opens both eyes. But the white thread used in the final act of Shunsui's Bankai is able to negate things like intangibility, which is how he defeated him. Here's where it gets interesting. Some people say the story that he narrated is actually the story of his sister-in-law. If you thought his Bankai was sad, that's because his sister-in-law's story is 10 times worse. She was a member of the Issei family, and she had this curse that ended up being passed on to Shunsui's brother, who died from it. The sorrow of losing her husband from a shared affliction is where Act 1 wound sharing came from. Sister ended up leaving the family, vowing to never return, but some unforeseen circumstance forced her to come back. She thought that if she married someone outside of her family that she could dispel the curse, but she ended up killing her husband instead, which is the cause of the shame mentioned in Act 2, the incurable disease. Act 3, drowning in the abyss, was derived from the feelings of watching her husband die. Once he was afflicted by the curse, it was only a matter of time before he died, and she knew this and had to sit there and watch the entire time. Similar to the abyss created by Shunsui's Bankai, where they both watch each other slowly get drained of their spiritual pressure. Since the curse was considered an Issei family treasure, she was executed for giving away that said family treasure. Hence where Act 4, the execution, is derived from. So that's my favorite theory as to the true story behind Shunsui's Bankai. It's incredibly sad, but it definitely fits the vibes we all saw in this last episode. But y'all let me know what y'all think in the comments. Make sure you like, subscribe, and follow the page. Thank you, thank you, thank you, thank you, thank you.